My new computer's in the post.
Oh. Hi everyone. We're just waiting for the participants to come in now. But yeah, if you want to grab your cup of tea and biscuit, we'll start in a minute. Okay, I think the numbers sort of stabilised, so I think we're safe to begin. Okay, so welcome to this webinar, Bectu Live Events Network, supporting live events through COVID. The Arts and Entertainment Division, which Live Events is a part of, has been doing these webinars all week. So there's been a session for theatres, there's been a session for art galleries and art workers, there's been a session for cinemas, and today is the session for live events. So if you do work in the theatre, you're welcome to stick around, but just bear in mind that if you ask any questions about theatre, we're probably going to direct you to the previous theatres session that hopefully should be going up on YouTube. Okay, so just to let you know what this session is going to comprise of, basically I'm going to be sort of walking you through the kind of context of where we are in terms of government lobbying. Helen Ryan, who is my colleague on the panel as well, the Assistant National Secretary for the Arts and Entertainment Division, she'll be walking us through the changes to the furlough scheme and also the self-employed income support scheme, just so you're across that. And then I will take us through sort of health and safety points to consider during this time. Now, I am going to bear in mind that with live events, this is one of the main areas where we're really like, can this be done? So this is when we're looking at the information, we're going, can this be done safely, and also for the businesses to survive? You know, can this work? So this is what we're going to have a look at, and there'll also be some webinar polls that will be running throughout. So look out for those and please participate. And the idea is that this sort of can kind of feed back on a sort of anecdotal level to some of our government lobbying as well. Okay, all right, so I'm going to share the screen and also just to let you know, Helen's camera is not currently working. If she uses it, the whole internet connection breaks. So we have a lovely picture of Helen on holiday in nicer pre-pandemic times. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen now. Okay, and also to say, if you have any questions, please, if you cannot put them in the chat, because I find it quite hard to keep track of the chat sometimes. You're welcome to chat if you want to. If you put a question there, I may not see it. Please go to the bottom of the screen, a bar will pop up and there'll be a Q&A bit there. And if you just open that up, put your question in, you can put it in anonymously or you can leave your name, whatever you prefer. And hopefully we'll be able to look at that. We'll do that at the end. Okay, so this is, again, welcome to Bectu Live Events Network supporting, that doesn't say the right thing. That says something else. Let me just check. No, okay, apologies. I clicked on the wrong one. There we go. I did one for art galleries as well. So professional. So please, my apologies, it's supporting live events. I didn't change it from the art gallery slide. Okay, so getting into the context, just so you know, Bectu members in live events, the main sort of areas and branches we have, we comprise of, in London, we've got the London Union of Venue Technicians, That covers any kind of technician who is working in a music venue or working in conferences or even tours and festivals if they're based in London. Then we've got the London Union of Crew. They are, you know, they can be any crew who are based in London or working in London in live events. Then we've got London Live Events, that kind of mops up any other administrative roles or managerial roles, promoters, whatever, who are based in London. And then we've also got a specific live events code that we use for anybody who isn't based in London. So if you're in any of our freelance branches, because we just put all freelance arts and entertainment crafts together in the same branch, then you will have that code and you should get the correct emails about live events. But we know there's some crossover, especially in the regions. So, you know, unfortunately, that's just the way that the system has to work. But that's how it is at the moment. We've also got a few branch venues. For instance, I mean, we've got the Royal Albert Hall, which technically is a live events venue, concert hall. Okay, so we've got a mixture of employees, workers, and freelancers. So PAYE freelancers, but also, you know, genuinely self-employed sole traders. So we've got some union agreements in live events. For instance, we've got one up with the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, but we don't have many, and we don't have any national agreements. So there's still a lot of work to do. Where workers have been contracted on a PAY basis, we have worked collaboratively so that we can get as many people furloughed as possible, but it hasn't been as effective as it has been in some of the more established spaces we've been in, because we don't have those relationships built up as well yet. But there has been a lot of success, but there's been a lot of people who have fallen through the cracks. With the self-employed income support scheme, there was a big push in terms of lobbying and campaigning when the furlough scheme was announced, because a lot of people were like, what about the self-employed? The creative unions have particularly pushed on this. I'll touch on this later. But yes, I would say, you know, there's a lot of people who've worked incredibly hard on this. I would say the research team in Prospect Bectu have done amazing lobbying work. You know, officials have done a lot of stuff, but I would also say, you know, the members have been incredible. Anytime I've asked them to do anything, you know, go on TV or, you know, write to their MPs, people have been really responsive. So, you know, if you were one of those members, thank you so much, because it's really made a difference. And I hope we can have some more success going forward in these really difficult times. Okay, so I thought just to give a bit more context as well, we did, Bectu put out it was just after the self-employed income support scheme came into being. We did put out a question on something called the Thought Exchange, which is, it's a survey, but you may have done this. It's a survey, but it's basically where you ask one question and then everybody can put in their comments anonymously. Everyone can see the comments, and they can also rate them on how important they think those comments are to them. So the question we put out was, as the COVID-19 crisis unfolds, what are the financial consequences for you without government income support? So this particular thought exchange, it wasn't just for people in live events, but we did get quite a few people in live events responding, which is why I've used it in this particular instance. It was basically aimed at anybody who was self-employed or a freelancer. So we had people in there who were film and TV, which their issues are, some of the issues were similar, but I think now, as we're kind of in a bit of a slightly different phase, I think their issues are slightly different. But we also had live events people and theatre people. So anyone in the arts and entertainment area who was freelance or was self-employed would have been filling that in. So to just give you an idea, we had over 651 people took part. Well, 651 people took part. I don't know why I wrote over. But yeah, so 651 people took part, and the top concern out of the 719 issues raised was, when is my next job? I've just got no idea if we're talking weeks, months, or maybe a year. And I think this this is what we're starting to look at now. It's like, what is the future of not just in the individuals within the industry, what is the future of the industry as a whole? Okay, so other concerns that came out of this particular thought exchange that I felt were, you know, I can't be sure if they came from live events people, but I think they're relevant, you know. It's not just about the jobs that are cancelled during the lockdown, it's the jobs that are being cancelled in the future. The financial implications are not just about now, it's about how long before the work comes in after the pandemic is over. And I think that's, you know, I think we all are thinking that. Another point was, what are we meant to do when our money runs out? My money ran out yesterday following monthly bills. How am I supposed to survive until we hear something when I can't afford to feed us now? And this is, you know, this is back in when we just had the self-employed income support scheme come in. So I hope that that person was able to access that. And then the other point was an uncertain industry to return to. Is this going to affect how many people could return to the industry? Will life resume as if it was on pause and reconvene with no major interrupt? So I think these are the main things that really I think we want to start tackling now. Well, with the money issue, I think that ties into, will people leave the industry? Are we going to have lots of skilled people who are going to be able to just sit there and wait for the industry to wake up again after this pandemic? Will the industry be in the same form at the end of this if there's no government financial support? And will people return? If people have to go elsewhere, will they think, do you know what, actually, live events, I loved it, I love the work, but you know what, the money isn't great and the terms and conditions aren't great. Maybe I'll just stick in this role in case anything like this happens in future. You know, these are things that we need to start addressing now if we want this amazing industry to survive and come back. Okay, so I'm going to pass this over to Helen, and Helen's going to run you through just quickly the changes to the furlough scheme.
Hello, everybody. Right, so we all knew that the job retention scheme was going to get extended, but for about a week, none of us knew how that extension was actually going to play out. There was lots and lots of gossip, loads of things on Facebook and everything. And to be honest with you, we sort of stopped looking and trying to prejudge what the Chancellor was going to actually say, because he has kept his cards very close to his chest for all of his announcements. So we finally got the announcements last Friday, and so if I just deal with the job retention scheme first, which is for the PAYE people, the government have said that the extension of the scheme is till the end of October, and there are 3 key changes to the scheme. They are challenges as well. From the 1st of July, employers will be able to bring back workers on a part-time basis into the flexible workers provision. Obviously, the employer has to pay for the hours that they work, but they can claim for the hours that they're not worked. How that will be calculated is anybody's for anybody to say at the moment, and the HMRC have assured us that there will be further advice and guidance coming out on, I think it's around the 10th or the 12th of June. The restrictions have been dropped so that they can actually do that for a minimum of a week, but it can actually be for longer if that's what they want. We are starting to see the closure of the scheme to new furloughees. I think that's going to make its way into the Oxford English Dictionary at some point, but we're using it now because we all know what it means. And from the 1st of July, the scheme will only be open to those people who have been placed on furlough by the 10th of June. So if somebody's still having a fight, which we still are with employers, about placing people on furlough and maximising the use of the scheme, if they're not furloughed and accessing the scheme by the 10th of June, I'm afraid future access to the scheme is going to be prohibited. And from August, the level of the scheme grants will start to be reduced. So from August, the employers will have to pay the NI and pension costs, which is around about 5%. From September, they will be required to contribute 10% of the wage costs plus the NI and pension contributions, so that's around about 15%. And from October, they will be required to contribute 20%. So again, that's up to about 25% of the scheme. Of employer contribution. The scheme is due to finish at the end of October, and unfortunately, access to the scheme is conditional on the employer contributing to the scheme. So they can't say, well, you know, we'll just claim 60% of wages and keep people on. They have to make the contribution. The self-employed scheme has also been extended. It will work in the same way as previous 3 months grants. It has been reduced down to 70% of the self-employed profits over the past 3 years, not 80%. And again, that scheme will close in October. There have been no other changes made to the scheme to try and get more people access to the scheme. And with the extension and the reduction, it's unlikely, in our opinion, that we're going to be successful in getting the scheme opened up to those that have fallen through the net. Although the conditions to the scheme was not immediately as drastic as everyone feared, and the extension of the self-employment scheme is welcomed, it's still not good news for live events. And that's because members and employers are worried about their future, as social distancing measures means that they cannot return to work until the measures are eased or lifted, and therefore cannot return as quickly as other parts of the economy. Bectu, and I know Naomi's going to come on to this later, Bectu is continuing to campaign for clear communication about the approach and thinking on how live events can get back to work again. And we're looking at the types of measures, including this part of the industry being exempted from the contributions to the job retention scheme, a new scheme to support the freelance workforce, and additional financial support to ensure the industry is in a position to start up again and to protect it in the future. So we wrote to the DCMS yesterday along those lines. So the lobbying is still continuing to try and get some sort of relief from the government, whatever that be, and recognise that unlike some other parts of the entertainment industry, we can't switch on the switch, dust ourselves down and get back into business, because that simply just will not happen in this area. Hopefully that's okay, Naomi.
Yeah, that was lovely. Thank you. I'm sorry, I was a bit behind on the slides. I do apologise.
I did notice. I was going to prompt you, but I thought, oh well, I'll keep going.
I think I've lost my knack with these slides. So okay, so I'm going to take us through health and safety stuff, and then also I'm going to touch on the government lobbying. I mean, my government lobbying slides are a little bit slightly, well, they're essentially what Helen said, but it's slightly different because we're sort of finalising those points now. So, you know, bear with me on that. But with this COVID-19 situation, I think, you know, I'm just going to put forward what you would need to be safe at work. I think the conversation that needs to be had after that is that possible to do social distancing in some of these spaces or any of these spaces and be safe and still have a business model that is profitable. So I don't want you to hear me sort of running through this and going, we can't do that. I totally appreciate that, but I'm just going to run through the reality of what needs to be done just to be safe. And then we can have a discussion about everything else after that. So if you are at any point going to be asked to return to work, or if you are doing the odd job, I have heard of some crew moving the odd thing for people who want to get it out of, you know, a space where they left it. You need to do risk assessments. you need to know what you're going into, you need to know what you're walking into, and you need to be thinking about what happens if something unforeseen occurs. You know, everybody who's going into that job needs to know what the protocols are, what measures they need to take to be safe, what their role is, and how they need to participate in order to be safe. So you need to be thinking about all of that. And so if you aren't familiar with how to do a risk assessment, you know, it may be worth looking at the Bectu COVID-19 pages or the Prospect COVID-19 pages. There's a lot of really good health and safety stuff on the Prospect website. And also have a look at the health and safety executive pages. They've got lots of templates for risk assessments as well. If you are lucky enough to be in a workplace with a health and safety rep, then, you know, maybe give them a call. But I know in live events that's, you know, like a rare endangered bird. So, you know, okay, so just to run you through, some of you might be familiar with this, the hierarchy of controls. So sort of health and safety guide that's regularly used. So you can see from the hierarchy of controls that you've got at the top, you've got the most effective way of being safe, and at the bottom you've got the least effective. So the first one is elimination, which is to physically remove the hazard. Now, obviously, I wish we could just remove COVID-19, but unfortunately, that is not in our ability to do so right now, unless a vaccine or something turns up, in which case, you know, that would change things a lot, but we can't do that right now. So moving on, substitution, replace the hazard. We can't do that either. You can't just pick up a virus and go, right, we're going to replace you with, I don't know, a bucket. You know, you can't do it. So the first two aren't possible in a pandemic. So the third one is when we start getting into things that we can actually actively do. So engineering controls. So this is when you're isolating people from the hazard. So that means, I mean, aside from the obvious thing of like making sure that people who should be shielding aren't coming into work, making sure that anyone who's showing symptoms doesn't come into work, you know, that the self-isolation rules are in place, which I would hope people would be abiding by anyway. Then you've got things like, does the box office need to have a perspex screen? Are people too close to the box office? Do they need to be, I mean, it comes further down, but do they need to be wearing PPE? But that is the perspex screen would be something that would be more tangible and higher up the hierarchy of controls, because it's an actual barrier between you and the risk. Then we've got administrative control. So this is changing the way that people work. So this is about, you know, is there any kind of hot desking? You know, there might be in like the more administrative areas, in the office areas of the venue or whatever, you know, is there any kind of hot desking? You know, that probably needs to stop. Also, things need to be cleaned far more regularly. You know, how are you going to make sure that spaces that are used by lots of different people aren't dirty? You know, that kind of stuff needs to be thought about. I'll go into that in more detail, but that's kind of what you need to think about. Then we come into the least effective, which is PPE, so personal protective equipment. So this is where, you know, you're thinking about, are there spaces where we need to make sure that somebody is wearing a visor if they have interactions with other members of staff? But throughout all of this, you know, you really need to be maintaining a 2-meter distance, which in some roles may not be possible. So maybe you can use PPE, but is that safe? Is it necessary? Is it really, you know, can we not do it some other way? Okay, so just to look into the PPE aspect of things, you know, it's considered the last resort. And it's when you can't keep more than 2 meters apart. So really the question needs to be, is it necessary that you aren't 2 meters apart? You know, PPE should be identified as suitable for the purpose. So surgical masks would be IR or IIR types, or respirators should be FFP2 or FFP3. Please don't ask me loads of questions about the details of those, because all I know is that they are specific types of personal protective equipment, and you just need to make sure that what you are, look on the Health and Safety Executive website, look at what the task you are doing and what is the most suitable PPE for that instance. I mean, I would say people who are on box office and things, I mean, ideally, really, you should be behind some kind of screen, some kind of perspex screen. And also technicians, I mean, I know some in a venue, some have a box with perspex around them already, but is it going to prevent people coming up to them? Okay, so if gloves are provided, the virus can still be transferred to the surface. If the wearer touches their face, they could still contract the disease. Perhaps frequent hand washing or sterilisation is a better option. I mean, it's just about, yes, gloves can be useful, but only if you're changing them regularly, and also, they're no different to your hands. If you're just keeping gloves on all day and you're not washing them, then actually that's worse than if you just had your hands and were washing them regularly. So you need to make sure you're using it you're changing it regularly if you need to use that, and also only use it if it makes sense. So there need to be enough cleaning products around. But I mean, when we start to apply this to things like, grotty music venues and, toilets, festivals, I mean, that's what needs to happen. Is it possible? I don't know. So, okay, so when we look at audiences for live events specifically, so the kinds of pressure points where the risk assessment really needs to be focusing in on are queues to enter the venue, queues to enter the festival. Are people 2 meters apart? Is it safe? What do you do if people won't stay 2 meters apart? What if people are drunk and being aggressive? Like, how does that work? How do you keep the customers safe and yourself safe? Do you need more security? What kind of protective equipment do they need in order to be safe? These are the things that people need to be thinking about. Queues at the box office, ticket checking, often in a lot of the little venues, the box office is right back at the door. How is that going to work? If there's any area further down or in a different level where people are checking tickets, how do you protect that person? It may be even that you get to a point where you're like, actually, we don't have that person there. We have to do that earlier on in a safer space. Then you've got queues at bar and catering. I mean, this is the other thing. Is it sensible having, catering, I think maybe that's probably more of a festival issue really than anywhere else. But is it okay to have catering on site? I mean, I don't know, I assume that things will change if we're going to start having outdoor markets again. But, how do you manage queues for a food truck? You're going to need more security. With bars, how are you going to, in a loud music venue, how is somebody going to tell you their drink order? You lean over, you shout, you're like, how is that going to work? Are you going to have to stagger the times when people get their drinks? If you do that, then it's everybody going to cram around at the same time. So, I think, and if you shut the bar, is anybody going to want to come? Is the business going to be profitable? Because a lot of the money comes out of the bar. So then there's queues at the restrooms. That's quite problematic because, in a lot of festivals, you've got really narrow festival toilets, maybe not necessarily the cleanest. In a venue, you've got often just the swing door, so you can't see if people are coming in and out. You don't know if someone's immediately on the other side of the door. Are you going to need to have somebody actually standing by the toilet, checking who's going in and out and how many people are going in and how many people can be in there and be safe? How often is it going to be cleaned? So these are things that we need to think about if it's even going to be feasible. Entering different spaces inside the venue festival, access to different venue levels. Is there going to be some kind of one-way system? I mean, there's even been discussion now about temperature checks going into festivals, maybe that's something for venues, temperature checks, or someone was even talking about actually having the track and trace app in order to get into the festival. So maybe that's a way around it. But I mean, with other spaces like art galleries and theatres, they are talking about, you know, and cinemas, they're talking about, you know, having certain ways around the building, certain ways that people walk. I don't know if that's really workable for live events, but, you know, seating, viewing arrangements for audiences, you know, I mean, mosh pit, how's that going to work? Like, I don't even know. So, I mean, I put it there because it's something to consider. Exit when closing. If people are really drunk, how are you going to get them out and socially distance them? Or are we going to end up with something like a temperature check system where, you know, we just accept that everybody who's come in is safe, and then we just act as normal and get them out of the building normally. Then there's emergency evacuation, first aid, facilities for visitors with particular needs. They need to be considering what happens when something goes wrong. You know, what do you do when something goes wrong and still remain safe? So just to kind of wrap it up, the kind of 5 questions that that Prospect, Chris Warburton, the health and safety officer at Prospect, has been sort of putting out there as things to consider for everybody. This isn't just specific to live events, but it's, you know, the 5 questions that he has is the job really necessary? 2, how can the job be organised in order to maintain social distance, plus wider health and safety? Number 3, has work been planned so that colleagues are only on site if they need to be? 4, has communication on site established that everyone understands their role? And then 5, if there are exceptional situations when social distancing can't be maintained, how will the risk be managed and contact minimised? I think, you know, I think maybe we're moving into a different area past some of these questions though. We're actually moving into an area of what, you know, what's the new normal kind of thing. So what do we do in order to make live events work? You know, when is it definitely safe to start doing things like this again? And is it going to be things like temperature checks, contact tracing apps? Because the things I've been talking about, I don't know how you feel about them, but for me, I feel like a lot of these maybe aren't necessarily viable for a lot of live event spaces. But we put them out there because that's kind of what the reality of being safe in this environment is. So before we get, government lobbying, I totally forgot, sorry, apologies. The government lobbying, just to wrap it up, the government lobbying is the self-employment income support scheme and the job retention scheme. So Helen was sort of talking about us creating a new scheme for people who work in creative industries. I mean, I've written they should continue without tapering. I mean, to be honest, I think we'd be happy with either a new scheme or the old schemes continuing, although lots of people fell through the gaps. You know, we do need to bear that in mind. So, but just also to point out that there was an awful lot of work done by the creative unions, by Bectu Prospect, by Equity, the Actors Union, by the Musicians Union. You know, that self-employed income support scheme really was a result of incredible work by union members and union staff. And I think, you know, let's if we need to push again, which we do, to get more support, let's try and do that again. And then also we've been talking about, you know, grants for live events, venues, festivals, employers to get them through this period. So, you know, I've written save jobs and save culture. So that's kind of a summation of where we are. So just before we get into the questions that we have, I just wanted to run a quick poll because I really want to know if the people on this call think this is doable. That's kind of my take. So I've got a few on social distancing, and the idea of these polls is to kind of get a feel, a little bit of anecdotal evidence just to feedback on top of our surveys and on top of who we're talking to about, you know, where we think people are. So the first poll I wanted to ask you about was, so I've got a few here. I've got a few specifically on social distancing on different types of live events venues. So the first one I've got is on arenas. And the question is, do you think it is possible for arenas, large venues, so live events venues, to remain profitable with social distancing measures in place and no additional government financial support? So the answers to that are yes, no, or don't know. So I'm going to launch that now, and it should pop up on your screen. If it doesn't, you should be able to click on the poll at the bottom. Okay, so while that's ticking along, I'll leave that up. We'll have a look at some questions. So you still there, Helen? You ready for some questions?
Yeah. I have had some that were very particular to individuals whilst you've been talking.
Oh, okay. Have you got, are there any you particularly want to focus in on to answer right now?
No.
Okay, so is there any update in the extra support for limited people that pay themselves by dividends? Do you want to take that, Helen?
My understanding is no, there isn't. But I was actually trying to get on our website to see whether there was any further update being put on. But I'll have a quick look while you're dealing with some of the others, and I might come back to that and see what I can find.
Yeah. Okay. I'll leave that there. Okay. So the next question we have is, the furlough scheme is terribly complicated. It took my accountant nearly 2 months to get me set up. It will be good if it can be cancelled and reactivated if I need to do a couple of days work or so without breaking the rules. They should have a simple journal type of system so we can let them know if this happens, and then they can deduct the support for those days. I believe if it is stopped, it needs to be reapplied again. I mean, that's more of a comment really, isn't it? But I mean, the one thing I would say is you probably need to get a better accountant, because that's a very long time to set it up. But I think also the furlough scheme is, I don't know what your personal circumstances are. It may be that you were a limited company and they were trying to furlough you on your own PAYE system, which might be slightly more fiddly, although possible. But I think that, you know, the furlough scheme has let a lot of people slip through, and yes, it is probably too complicated. I think it's the fact that they're saying it's going to end in October, you know, that they're tapering it down, making employers make payments along the way to October. You know, they might as well, a lot of those people, they might as well just, it's like, well, they're not going to be on that scheme anymore, or they're going to get made redundant. You know, so I think the government needs to wake up. I mean, I was listening to the radio this morning, and Ed Miliband has suddenly reappeared and was talking about how you know, arts, theatre, live events need additional government support. They will not survive this crisis as they are if there isn't some additional support. And I think, you know, I'm hoping that message is getting through. It's certainly getting through to a lot of politicians. Whether it's getting through the Tory government, I don't know, but it's, you know, I'm hopeful that they will change their perspective on this. Okay, so we've got one from John. Has the Treasury even considered the fact we won't be going back to work when the support schemes close? I think, okay, so I was talking to, I won't say who because I probably shouldn't, but I was talking to somebody from a large venue who's the chief executive of that venue and in the live events industry. And he was saying that he felt that the Treasury, it's not so much the Treasury, it's more the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. And his feeling was that that department hasn't quite grasped that social distancing and profitability may not necessarily work. Because he was saying, yeah, I can have social distancing, but we won't even break even. We won't go anywhere near breaking even. So we can't survive the other end of this. And I think from what he was saying, the message is slowly starting to go through. I think there is beginning to be an acknowledgement by the DCMS that something has to give. The Treasury, I'm not sure. I'd have to check in with our research team, but I assume not, because they've tapered the scheme and they've said that it will end in October. If all germs are gone in October, hooray! But you know, I'm not super confident on that. Okay, so I'm trying to see if there's like a sort of one for Helen.
I don't mind just sitting here listening to you. That's fine.
Oh, just the sound of my own voice. I'm just looking.
And I've looked on our website, by the way, to see if there is any further update for any changes for limited people. And no, there is no update at the moment, but I'll put it on a list to see if there's any rumblings about anything in the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've seen it it's on our lobby points that the lobby have been feeding back to us regularly, and that is certainly not been forgotten as an issue, that it's a problem. Okay, so is anyone planning any reimagined live events this year? If so, how are they different? When are they on? Well, I mean, this is sort of very anecdotal stuff, and stuff that I've read. So I mean, it's not necessarily anything that you wouldn't have seen yourselves. But as I said before, there has been some talk. In my head, I feel like this is the only element of hope, if there's no additional government support, is that maybe if the R number, the rate of infection, gets to a point that is reasonable, and I don't know how you all feel about it, but I feel a little nervous about the government steps currently. I'm not entirely convinced that it is as safe as they say. But that aside, if we do get to a point where they say the R number is a reasonable place and we get contact tracing up, is it something where we can actually go, okay, right, we're going to have this festival, we're going to do all our social distancing to get in with extra security, I assume. Whether that's affordable, I don't know, but that they could do that. Temperature checks, and also everybody has to have the contact tracing app, and there has to be some system of reacting to that app quickly within the festival. So you only are allowed to enter if you pass those 2 tests. Maybe that's something you could do for a venue as well. But I mean, when you're getting to the smaller venues and you talk about the amount of, you know, there would need to be some kind of extra funding to assist smaller venues and festivals to be able to do that if that's the only solution. So that's what I've heard, but that is very much rumblings, and that's not a definite something that's actually happening yet. The only other things I've seen that actually happened were things in Germany with like people in cars at raves, which to me just seemed absurd, but you know, maybe that's somebody's bag, I don't know. Okay, so, right, so I'm going to look at the answer to that poll because I would like to get the answer to the other. So I'm going to end the polling. So 92% of the callers voted, and I will share those results. So 4% of the call thought that it was possible for arenas, large venues to remain profitable with social distancing measures in place and no additional government financial support. 78% thought no, 18% didn't know. Okay, so I'll share those results. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing those results, so if you missed it, sorry. I'm going to move on to the next one, which is music venues. So it's basically the same question, but it's for medium-sized, small music venues. I mean, I can already predict what you're going to say, but I want to have this like in some tangible figures to kind of go, look. Okay, so I'm going to launch that one. Okay, so let's see if there's, I mean, is this one maybe you might want to tackle, Helen? How do you safely do a mass evacuation with social distancing in place? Is that one or is that too health and safety for you?
Well, I mean, it's something that we're looking at across the piece, isn't it? I mean, this is something we've been. One of our colleagues, Douglas McGill, he's got an interest and a bit of an expertise in health and safety, and he's starting to lead on the health and safety side of things for us. And I've been talking to him about these type of things across all of the industry. So it's not just about mass evacuations in live events, it's also the same problems in cinemas and theatres as well. So it's something that we're trying to work our way through with and talk to the various bodies and also the DCMS and HSE. I don't know where Doug's got on that, but as you know from the theatre one, the same question came up in that webinar as well. So it is something that we're trying to challenge, tackle and get our head around, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I mean also there's the factor of, you know, what is the risk you're facing, because, you know, if there's a really serious incident and everybody needs to get out quickly, then, you know, it may be that that incident is more serious and therefore trumps COVID-19, but it's not going to change the fact that that's still a problem. It's very difficult to know. Yeah, but we are looking into it, and Doug's really excellent, so hopefully he'll come up with some bits and pieces soon. Okay, so we've got a question here. Many of us did put in a credible amount of effort into the push for the self-employed income support scheme and have then got nothing for our efforts. Sorry. Do you not think it is worth pushing for a fairer system where the entire workforce gets equal treatment? Okay, so in terms of Bectu and in terms of me personally, and probably I think I speak for the London venue technicians and the London Union crew with this, because we've had conversations about this and they've said similar things. You know, we would all love it if they would bring in a universal basic income that covered everyone, and we didn't have to faff around with these schemes, and, you know, people didn't fall through the cracks. Unfortunately, we're dealing with a Tory government, and although actually, in fairness, I expected way less from them, and Rishi Sunak has done more than I thought he would, but it's not enough. It's not enough, and we are in a situation where I think now we really have to flag up that people have, you know, we've already said to them repeatedly, people have fallen through the cracks. They know that, but I think they are thinking, well, will be sorted by October. They can figure out how to social distance. They'll come back. And we're saying that people won't be there then. People aren't just going to be able to pick everything up. And also, how are you expecting us to do this? So I think the push has to be support for the creative industries specifically. I think the ship has sailed on general support. I think industries themselves have to be going, this isn't working in our industry, we cannot survive. And also we need to put, I think it's getting through to them that live events is a huge money spinner for this country. And also, you know, if we're talking about Brexit, you know, if we're talking about brand Britain or whatever, you know, yeah, I can already hear the London Union venue technicians, their eyes rolling in their head as I say that. But if we're talking about that, the main thing that Britain has is its culture. If we don't look after that, we are shooting ourselves in the foot. So I think if look out for anything that Bectu asks you to do in terms of, you know, it's probably going to be a lot of the same stuff. Writing to your MP, you know, pushing stuff out on social media, if we need people on the TV, if we need people to take pictures of themselves. But we really need to push, do another push to kind of go, we cannot be left behind because the industry won't make it through this, you know. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox. Right, so, oh, Helen, this might be one for you. Is Bectu part of the Cultural Renewal Task Force?
The unions have seats, but at the moment, the way it's done, it's all done through like the TUC. So, the seats for trade union membership are, excuse me, are limited. Mike Clancy was, because we have not been happy with that, and in fact Tracy Brabin is not happy with the makeup of these seats as well, and has been the groups, and has been campaigning that the unions actually should have more of a role to play. And this is hot off the press, so I'm just trying to find my email from Mike Clancy. There we go.
Should I share the results of the poll while you're finding that?
Yes, please.
Okay, because I have a few polls actually. I haven't run these as quickly as I should. So in terms of the music venues, so medium-sized, small music venues, do you think they can remain profitable with social distancing measures in place and no additional government financial support? No one said that was possible. Surprise, surprise. 96% said no, and 4% said they didn't know. So I'll share those, and then I will look quickly, because I'm not going to leave them up for long because we've got a few other polls to get through. Okay, so the next one I wanted to run was on festivals. So this one might be more interesting because maybe there are some options. So social distancing festivals, do you think it's possible for festivals to remain profitable with social distancing measures in place and no additional government financial support? So I'm going to launch that. Okay. Did you manage to find that email, Helen?
Yes, I have, but every time when you launch something, you take over my screen. I'm halfway through something, and then I get your poll.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you see it now? I've taken it down now.
I can, yes. There's all sorts of things that we're trying to get involved in, and this latest one probably isn't the task force, but we yesterday had confirmation. We're now on all the relevant DCMS groups, so that is better for us. But the issue for theatres and live events is survival cash. Right, they're saying, oh God, it's a long email. Basically, the DCMS task groups are aiming to have their plans written by Friday the 12th. And so therefore they want as much information. So I mean, I'm just reading that because it only came in yesterday into my inbox. So I need to work out what more information they require from us with regard to live events that we need to feed in to that grouping. But it's a bit like a bum fight actually at the moment to try and get on various task groups and things. And Tracy Brabin is talking about setting up a shadow task force that actually is more representative of the industry, involves more of the unions, is more diverse, basically it's not a sort of by special invite only thing. And I know Philippa is going to be representing Bectu on that, so so that's something as well we're trying to do.
Yeah, Tracy Brabin, absolute hero. She's been very good. Okay, so I'm going to try and power through a few of these questions and see if we can answer all of them. But looking at this from a backstage view, how do you socially distance tour buses? Also, a touring concert works with close working arrangements. With social distancing and only one department working at one time, you will not make doors. Are we talking a production day for every load-in? I think, I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, I think possibly. I mean, that's the question around profitability. Is it doable? Because you either have to go, okay, I think for the tour bus, I think it probably would have to be something like film and TV, where you go, okay, this is the group of people who are on the bus and they are a social bubble, and out of that bubble, they do not go. And they probably have to quarantine for 2 weeks prior to getting on the bus. Which, I mean, I suppose that's what you would have to do. I mean, I've been having some conversations with art technicians who I also cover. They're the people who sort of install artworks and also make them and, you know, do various sort of moving with the artwork. But they've been sort of having conversations about this, and a lot of them, it's like these bubbles. So it's kind of like schools, like it's the bubble. but they're still going home and coming back. So it's the R number has to be at a certain point to make that viable. I think with the close working arrangements, yeah, I mean, I think it has to be bubbles, doesn't it? If it's really not possible, possibly with the addition of PPE. But yeah, I mean, I think but you have to look at all the tasks that those people are doing together. You know, is that task necessary? But obviously with the touring bus, I mean, there may be an instance where more local crew, more local technicians get used, because then there are fewer people on the bus. You know, so there's a lot of things to kind of to deal with, but it would have to work on a case by case basis. Okay, I'm going to try and see if we can power through a few more. Okay, will any changes? Sorry, Helen, was there one that you saw that you?
3 minutes.
Oh, 3 minutes. Oh, God. Yeah, okay. Actually, I probably should finish up these polls. So I'm going to end the polling for the festivals. So the answer to that one was 9% thought yes, you could remain profitable with social distancing measures in place and no additional government financial support. 60% said no, 31% said don't know. Okay, so I'll share those results very briefly because I think I have two more I want to run. We're going to do breakneck polling. Okay, so these ones are a bit depressing and I apologize for it, but we're using this for our lobbying. So are you considering leaving the live events industry permanently? So this is as a result of this crisis, the situation that's happening, yes or no? Because I think we really want to hammer this home to the government, you know, how people are feeling right now. Okay, so let's have a look. Will any changes be made for how the calculation of average freelance income is made? As people with mixed full-time PAYE, 0-hour PAYE and self-employed has skewed average income for many people. I mean, I don't know about you, Helen, but I think probably in terms of how the scheme is set up right now, I'd be surprised if they change it. But I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
I think I said it earlier in my presentation that I think any changes to how either of the schemes are applied or calculated, now that they're being wound down, it's unlikely that we're going to get any further changes to either the method of calculation or individuals now being put into scope.
Okay, and I'm going to.
That's the feedback that I've been sort of getting from different lobbyists and things who I've been talking to and saying, well, you know, what can we do?
Okay, so for the leaving the industry poll, 44% said yes, 56% said no. Okay, so that's interesting. And then we're just going to do this last one, bang on time, and then we're going to wrap up. Apologies if we didn't get to your question. Return to work. This is very broad, very simple. Do you think when you return to work in the live events industry, whenever that may be, it will be safe? Yes, no, don't know. I think this is more a comment on what you think employers are going to be like. Okay, so while that's running quickly, I'll just answer one of these questions. Is social distancing in festivals a moot point potentially, given that most festivals have already been cancelled? Or are we to assume this will continue next year? I think the answer to that is we just simply don't know. We don't know, and I think it makes sense to look at what some of the worst scenarios could be, so at least we're prepared. But let's hope that's not the case. But I think the fact that a lot of them have been cancelled means that for this year we probably don't need to think about it, but if it's still an issue next year, we should be ready. Okay, right, I'm going to finish up this poll, and if I didn't get, oh goodness, there's only 3 questions left. Can I do very quick answers to these? Public transport, yes, that's a concern, definitely. You know, you need to think about, do these people need to be travelling in? Can they get to the venue? Is it going to be safe? Antibody testing could be the key to removing the need for social distancing. I mean, I think we already sort of talked about bubbles and the track and trace app. And has any pressure been put on the Treasury to raise the unfairness of the calculation method used for the self-employed income support grant? I mean, yes, we have said this. Whether it will change, I don't know, but I think really our attention needs to be on pressure to support creative industries, to think about them separately. So hopefully in that there would be a more sensible view on that, but we just don't know. Okay, so that is all the questions answered. I'm going to give you the results of the last poll. I'm going to end the polling. Right, do you think when you return to work in the live events industry it will be safe? 20% said yes, 44% said no, 37% said don't know. Okay, so it's a bit of a split around. But yeah, no won the day. Okay, well, I think on that note, we are going to leave you all. But thank you so much to Helen for joining the call. Thank you to all the attendees for joining. And I think really keep an eye out for any emails that Bectu is sending you, that your branches are sending you. Look in social media. I think we all need to be ready really for a last push on really getting the creative industries, live events, art galleries, theatres, all those spaces are going to need additional financial government support, and they need it like yesterday. So let's all try and push together one last time, and hopefully we can get somewhere. And I hope you all take care and that you're all doing okay in this really difficult situation. But yeah, hopefully this will be over soon. All right then, see you all. Bye.
Goodbye.